Hello, Linton Herbert again, and this is the 20th of um, September 2018. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and this is Horror Without Evidence, perhaps the most dismal piece of um, uh, creation you're likely to see ever. Um, and so hope you enjoy it. In this essay, I'll assume that you found your way to my talks, and there's a link, um, and, um, and you've watched them, understood them, at least talks 1 through 32. Uh, number 1 is about the least important, number 2 is about the most important. Or else to the other thing here, the nobs.net, that's the scripts, and if you want to follow links, we don't have to write the scripts down. Okay, again, the first 32 count. Here's a short version of what we went across there. As a review, in general, among animals, there is a relationship between population size, which is the inverse of kinship, and fertility. There's the relationship. The vertical axis here is population growth rate. You can see fertility, and the horizontal axis is population size, opposite of kinship. There's a rest point here where the population doesn't grow. Oh, goodness. Wouldn't it be nice if humans were divided into communities of exactly that size so that on average no population grew or shrank, and that would mean no inexorable increase in our impact on the environment or population pressures, leading us to unpleasantness. If we go much lower, make the population much lower, we'll get inbreeding and the population will go extinct. If it gets much larger, um, we'll get infertility and extinction. So there you have it. That's been seen in 1,700 different studies of different kinds of animals. Right. Here are 50 years UN experienced numbers tracking birth rates in the real world taken into poorest, broken down into poorest, middle, and richest. The poorest, yellow, richest, blue, in between is red. All I did was look that up in 2005, or maybe 2006, because the numbers end in 2005. Looked it up, copied down the numbers, and had the computer graph them. You follow this yellow line down to where it overlaps the red line, jump over to the red, follow it down till it overlaps blue, follow it down, you get all the same curve. You can't even see the edits. Um, this step off here is not an edit. That's within one of the curves we already looked at. Smooth as can be. Wherever we are going, we're all going to get there. Or in case you're watching this 100 years and 1,000 years in the future, where we go one, we go all. That's a quote from an anonymous source, calls himself Q, and is involved in politics, which won't involve us here. Okay, what's happened is the whole world is marrying cousins so infrequently. Our kinship is following, and fertility is following it right on down. All of us, everyone in the world. Well, exceptions are statistically invisible. Two mating strategies I know of is you can marry for status, which is based on violence, or marry for love, which is based on kinship. Moles and fruit flies um, choose love. And you know it's true of fruit flies because if a female fruit fly rejects a suitor, all she has to do is extend her ovipositor and he's done. He cannot proceed. So fruit fly love requires mutual affection, attraction. Voles, which you know, you'd have to look at the things I pointed you at to see why, but basically, mice and humans choose status. Wherever the mice go, we're going to go. So somebody put mice in a cage, counted them regularly. What happened was this. Um, Population size going up and time days going over. The population rose exponentially, tended to level off, and then bingo, right there. Ignore that silly arrow. Right there, last live birth. The mice from that then on their extinction was assured. The numbers fell, but but there you go. Mice die out if you just let them expand exponentially. Um, and that is what awaits us unless, unlike mice, we are able to understand the process and fix it. That's why I'm explaining it to you. I trust you grab the ball and run with it. Oh, it might not be so unpleasant at the end, tragic, but when all the babies are gone, the lack of outside threat and the lack of internal population pressure might lead to peace and prosperity until a few ancient codgers die out, well attended by their automated servants. Nothing in the numbers I've shown you suggests otherwise. Um, the I can assure you that that extinction is inescapable if we continue the same strategy. Um, you know, tiny populations would be statistically invisible. There might be some bad things happen along the way. I'm going to discuss some of those, but you bear in mind that I have no sound numbers to support any of this. Usually, I will give you numbers. I will give you references to with numbers. There are graphs and that sort of thing. This is pure speculation. If any of these problems do occur, at least you can be assured that there is a plausible biological explanation. These are possibilities. You can figure out from what you know otherwise how likely it. Okay, before we look at the pathology of falling fertility, let's see what we expect of normal humans. What would they be like? Real normal humans. Over eons, humans haven't increased to the point where we're standing on each other's heads, nor decreased to extinction. We've pretty much have lingered in tribes, and they had to be, by and large, around the rest point of fertility we pointed out. Um, the probably uh, it's that where we rested is not far from optimum population size in mice, as you saw on the previous graph. Did I show you that? Here. He mentions optimum population size, but he's talking about most rapid growth. That's not the optimum size, really. The optimum size is stability, isn't it? Provided there is a mechanism to restore the population if there's displacement away from stability, and there is. Um, so We've been near the balance point for a long, long time. Imagine that in equilibrium, each tribe has a sacred principle or object that identifies it. There was a nice little combination restaurant, museum, garden in Clearwater. Miss it. It was great fun. But they had a roughly, I don't know, 6 8 inch thick, 4 foot wide, 8 foot high, roughly slab of black worked stone, mostly just straight lines. And an explanation, thus and such explorer had found it with people worshiping it, and he took it home. Well, that's outrageous. He stole their god, okay? I imagine they came up with another one. Okay, every tribe has a sacred something or other idea, a cliche, book, idol. Obviously, there's a select advantage. The sacred object identifies a worshiper as a member of the tribe. Uh, uh, that helps accomplish isolation of the tribe and that preserves the tribe. If you're an atheist, it might give you some comfort to know that religion, practiced by almost everybody for almost all of human experience, has for its cause a nice biological mechanism, maybe. Um, but don't get too happy. We'll return to this subject later. Life in the tribe can't be absolutely stable because the world's mutable. Occasionally, misadventure will produce a significant fall in population size, which has to raise fertility until there's overshoot and the population is too big. Then there are two possibilities. Either the tribe will split, as explained by Robin Fox in the material I pointed you at, or it will be surrounded by other tribes if there's no readily available open land to move into. In that case, there's selective pressure to create a mental impulse in young men whose genome, and it's actually the epigenome, it's their methylation of their DNA in certain patterns. Young men whose inheritable characteristics reflect a population that's too big get either lazy or restless. The lazy boys do not pursue the ladies but lounge around the parent house, contributing enough work to pay for the cost of their food and then some, or they make a similar arrangement with another household. Either way, they get out of the gene pool, which has grown too large. You can see the advantage of that. I'd suspect that such lounge lizards spend more than the usual amount of time listening to the tales of the elders. It would have been the only entertainment. It was kind of their, television, internet, books, uh, DVDs. It would be over time. Over a lifetime, these lazy young men know all the stories the elders have better than anybody else in the tribe. So they become the tellers of tales in the next generation. They become the hive mind, or the hive memory, if you will. The restless ones wander out and encounter members of the neighboring tribe who will kill them on sight, or try to. Nobody wants to increase the diversity of the gene pool. That would shift the tribe's population and its fertility. It shift the population toward lower fertility. If the wanderer is able to kill a man or a child, well, in another tribe, well, that's somebody the individual's own people won't have to deal with in the future. So there will be smoldering warfare. Anytime two tribes to get together, there will be warfare between them. This is unfortunately the normal state of human experience. Smoldering warfare. Killing a young woman, of course, is worth killing 2 or 3 men, but if the wanderer can make her pregnant, there is the poison that keeps on poisoning. Either the victim's tribe must kill her or the child, either way, at terrible emotional cost, or the descendants in that tribe will bear the marginal infertility for generations. If that happens enough, the fertility of the victim tribe will collapse so they can be exterminated at little cost. No, it's not my sick mind talking. One band of chimpanzees will exterminate another. The genocide is not unique to humans. Now, with some empty land, the triumphant tribe can subdivide. So, sad to say, the impulse to genocide is a normal part of the human mind, tragedy that should be specifically looked for and prevented. Instead, we treat it as an aberration, as if it will never happen again. History says otherwise. That seems to me, and remember, I have no controlled statistics, just rumor and reasoning from the known biology. That's the lamentable state of normal humanity in a stable environment. So what one would expect for one reason or another, the population size rises and kinship declines to a pathological degree. Okay, suppose the population increases, fertility falls, and you shift out to the right on that curve I showed you, way out. First thing you'd expect would be an imperceptible increase in the tendency of the young man to go lazy or restless to the point where the whole community is dismantled. You can handle some of those, it'll tweak your population a bit, but if almost everybody does it, then the community cannot survive. The selective pressure for this effect is that the genetic diversity of the population has risen to a toxic level, and it's a danger to other communities. Those restless young men can swamp or so infest another community that one too is doomed. The whole species at risk. Selective pressure to snuff out the bloated population is overwhelming. Selection now takes mental sets that previously were adapted and reverses them. What was good before because it preserved the community is now bad with respect to the whole species because that population needs to be wiped out. It's become poisonous. But once seemed right now seems wrong and vice versa. One catastrophe can be the rise of a civilization. A number of tribes decide that it's better to cooperate than to fight. They formalize an arrangement where they all work together. Now, status previously was a rather small issue. A tribe of a couple hundred people, high status just means that you're young and capable and maybe the girls like you or you hunt better or whatever. No big deal. But now you've got a bunch of tribes together. Now, status is a very big issue. And as I said, humans go for status and violence, not love, or more than love. Okay, so one or more people begin to set policy. There wasn't a policy before, you winged it. Now there's policy. This gives them exalted status, wide scope for mating. This point of biological clock starts. In 10 generations, they go extinct. The regime simply vanishes like a wisp of vapor on a hot day. If there's a nearby civilization, they may fill the void, even keeping many of the primary producers at work. Otherwise, the whole thing falls back to nature and the normal and to normal people. What you have left, since in 10 generations you can do a lot of building, it's like the cold layers of Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. If you haven't read that, read it. The cold layers were a forgotten civilization in the jungle, just the buildings. Explorers will find mighty ruins that some fallen state unremembered by humanity. The population is gone along with its holy things, its language, its culture, and all else it holds dear. But humans, by and large, will persist. Hence, there's the direction selection pushes us. As the civilization declines, there may be a number of waypoints it can experience. I'll try to work out a few, but it seems most unlikely that the list I'll give you will be complete or include only valid possibilities. Again, no good data. One pathology one pathology that we might experience on the way out is women begin to accept men as mates who are not known to be related. And in fact, women gain a distaste for marrying cousins and are attracted to exotics. That's totally maladaptive in a normal society. That's crazy. You're just trashing your fertility. Um, uh, but it tends to pass unnoticed because women are generally regarded as less important than men, even though any fool should know women are far more important than men. In terms of simply having babies, I can do the work of 100 men easily. One woman cannot do the work of 100 women. I can be replaced. A woman cannot. In our normal tribe, I didn't mention it, but it seems obvious that women made all the important decisions. They got together and they gossiped and bickered, and and among the important decisions, in fact, of course, the most important decision was who'd marry whom. Humans value status based on violence above love based on kinship. You really need to go with the information I pointed to at the beginning. Women are not so good at violence. Strong, expendable men are useful for scaring off dangerous animals and even more dangerous outsiders. Another event is that the elite, the high status men in the society begin to accept migrants. Remember, it's the big shots who are establishing policy. One might theoretically describe three kinds of migrants. Ready? Oh, this is going to be incorrect, let me tell you that. But it's true if you think about it. One is refugees. If there's war or bad government, people might run away. True enough. Many years ago, however, after the World Trade Center atrocity, I figured there was going to be a war in Afghanistan. I volunteered to go help care for refugees. There were no refugees. The population was normal. They all elected to stay right where they were and live or die, slug it out right there. There are no actual refugees. What appear to be refugees are just a symptom of a society already in decline. Number two, possibly economic refugees, people who've moved all around the world exploiting the environment after environment. But if you go to the 15th link, from the second link, you'll see that economic, thing I pointed out. You'll look around Longhouse Valley is the name. You see that economic migrants only move as groups of families. Well, that should be obvious. How else are they going to find biologically suitable mates if it's not a bunch of interrelated families? There's no such thing as an individual economic migrant. Again, the appearance of such a thing is a pathological symptom. And then the third kind is sexual migrants, or you might say rape, murder tourists if you want to. Young men go out to make women pregnant. That is, in fact, normal, as we mentioned earlier. It's the first sign of poisonously high genetic diversity slash population size and appears when the population still might recover. It's it's sickly but not lethal. It's not quite normal. Don't be surprised if immigrants tend to engage in rape, murder, or worse. They are just responding to the demands of natural selection, uh, or the demands natural selection has imposed on them. I hasten to say that among the small group of immigrants I know, there's no rapist or murderer. On the other hand, they do have a conspicuous tendency to demand money in exchange for nothing. In fact, of course, most migrants, you know, find somebody local, get married, settle down, raise a child or two, uh, create a happy home, work industriously, happy to have escaped the relative poverty that they left behind, and leave behind, you know, gentle, warm memories of a friend of man and woman. Biologically, that's no different from rape. Do you understand? All nature cares about is who has babies. Whether it's done nicely or nastily, natural selection doesn't care. I care. Hope you care. All right, I'm trying to work out a chronological order, and I have less confidence that I'm getting right than my already low confidence that any of this is true at all. So, one form of infertility nature might throw at us is homosexuality. A man who is interested, a man who is uninterested in women is less likely to have children. He may marry for status with a low heterosexual drive, so he blends into bisexual and into homosexual. This has been widely studied. I know of no numbers that are acceptable to my analysis. And I really can't unravel it except to say that all these things, all these different sexual identities, sexual masks, or personae, they're all forms of a tendency toward infertility. And probably develops in a society by a degree. All right, that's enough for a snippet. Let's call that quits. This will be part one. Soon we'll have part two. Best of everything. I hope you survive, thrive, and do well. And yes, and I'll hope to see you again for another presentation.